It's a Queen sound, sort of a quartet that has been together for 14 years. I need Brian's voice, or I need Roger's voice and John's, to make that little delicacy that makes it a Queen sound.
Freddie Mercury was not a star forged by stage lights, but by exile, desire, rebellion, and things no one dared to name. In the world of rock, where masculinity was defined by guitar riffs and sweat, Freddie emerged as a paradox, a Parsi-born man in conservative Britain, an androgynous icon in an era of intolerance, and a voice that overpowered an entire orchestra, with just a trembling high note. He wore a tank top and a crown. He sang opera with the voice of someone who craved life and longed for death at the same time. He silenced the world with a single ayo, yet spent his entire life searching for a place he belonged. Freddie didn't need media storms or fabricated scandals. It was the way he lived truthfully, loved fearlessly, and died authentically that made him impossible to look away from. From the boy Farrokh Bulsara, raised between an Indian boarding school and the chaos of Zanzibar, to the man who sang, "The show must go on," when he could barely stand. Freddie's journey wasn't one of chasing fame, but of claiming the right to exist as who he truly was. How could a gay Indian-born man, living recklessly with HIV, loving cats more than people, and hiding behind the doors of Garden Lodge, become an irreplaceable icon of 20th century rock? Let Rock Discovery retrace every step, from Bohemian Rhapsody to Live Aid, from nameless romances to the will he left for a love that could not be spoken. And if you've ever felt different, ever felt alone in a crowd, then perhaps you'll understand why Freddie Mercury didn't need to live forever, to become immortal. Early life. Before he was Freddie Mercury, he was Farrokh Bulsara, an Indian boy born amidst waves of migration, colonialism, and chaos. Born on September 5, 1946, in Zanzibar, a British colony in East Africa, Farrokh didn't enter the world with a song, but with the explosions of a crumbling empire. His father, Bomi Bulsara, was an Indian civil servant working for the British colonial administration. He was strict, Zoroastrian, and believed that honor was the one thing a man must never lose. His mother, Jair Bulsara, was gentler, raising her children with ancient prayers, afternoon chai, and Bollywood tunes playing faintly on the radio. But in that family, no one spoke about emotions, no one hugged, no one taught Farrokh how to love himself if he was different. At age 8, Farrokh was sent to St. Peter's Boys' School in Panchgani, India, a Catholic boarding school for middle-class families. From then on, he lived apart from his parents for more than 9 months each year, returning home only for short winter holidays. In the unfamiliar dormitory, among cold plaster walls and English prayers spoken with perfect accents, the dark-skinned boy with the strange name quickly became a target for bullying. Teachers mispronounced his name, classmates mocked his buck teeth, shy posture, and stammering voice. But Farrokh didn't fight back. He didn't cry. He quietly sat at the old piano in the music room, playing each note as if it were the only way to tell the world, "I'm still here." It was at St. Peter's that Farrokh began learning classical piano, and soon became obsessed with rock and roll after hearing Elvis and Little Richard through a battery-powered radio. The headmaster quickly noticed his talent and wrote to his parents, encouraging them to let their son pursue music seriously. Bomi, who had always hoped Farrokh would become an accountant or a lawyer, was displeased, but didn't stand in his way. He simply said, "Never bring shame to the family." Farrokh formed his first band, the Hectics, with a few school friends. They performed at school festivals, in the dining hall, and sometimes in the old chapel. That 10-year-old boy had no idea. In those secret jam sessions between classes, something had awakened. Not just a passion, but a refuge for a soul that had never truly been embraced. In 1963, when Farrokh had just turned 17, the bloody Zanzibar revolution erupted. Thousands of Indians were killed. The Bulsara family was forced to abandon everything and flee to England. They arrived in Feltham, a suburb of London, with no money, no status, no friends, and no homeland. And from there, the boy Farrokh, who once played piano to fill the silence of boarding school, would begin to rebirth himself into someone entirely new, someone who would no longer bow his head, someone who would choose a new name, Freddie Mercury. The shift from Farrokh Bulsara to Freddie Mercury was not just a change of name, it was the tearing away of the past, a rebirth, a declaration, a new man forged, belonging to no one, needing no one's approval, but even bearing the name Mercury, the Roman messenger god. He never forgot what it felt like to be cast aside. For life, Freddie was a heretic, not white enough, not British enough, not straight enough, not safe enough to be understood, but not weak enough to beg for forgiveness either. And so, he turned all those imperfections into a kind of music no one could ever imitate. Early career. When the Bulsara family arrived in England, they didn't find paradise, only fog, gray brick walls, and the distant stares reserved for those who were not quite white. In Feltham, a poor suburb of London, Farrokh had to relearn how to speak, how to dress, how to exist without being labeled an outsider. But instead of retreating, he exploded from within. Freddie studied graphic design at Ealing Art College, where he didn't just learn fine arts, he learned the language of style, of symbols, of shock. In class, he wasn't the best student, but he was the one no one could look away from. Every day was a performance, bright clothes, silk scarves, black-painted nails, and a mysterious smile that left you wondering, was it confidence or a mask hiding something deeper? It was there that he met others also trying to find themselves. Brian May, a physics student with a homemade guitar. Roger Taylor, a dental student with dreams of being a rock star. They were in a band called Smile, and Freddie was their most devoted fan. But standing on the sidelines was never an option for Mercury. "You've got potential," he told them, "but you're not mad enough." When Smile's lead singer left, Freddie stepped up to the microphone and never stepped away again. A high tenor voice, chest-driven, defying every known rule of vocal technique, yet somehow touching something technique could never reach: primal instinct. In 1970, the band officially changed its name at Freddie's suggestion, Queen. The name was mocked. Too feminine, too ridiculous, too sexually ambiguous. But he grinned. "I like that name. It's powerful, it's provocative, and it's full of implications." This wasn't just a band, it was an aesthetic statement. Freddie began building a stage that was entirely his own. Tight leather bodysuits, fur capes, golden crowns, and 7-inch heels. He sang like an opera diva, performed like a stage god, and controlled the lighting as if the entire world were props in his hands. But behind the madness of those performances were nights he returned to his room alone, playing piano in the middle of ashtrays and half-finished sketches. An artist living between two worlds, the stage and the locked room no one could enter. In 1973, they released their debut album, Queen. Audiences didn't know what to call it: rock, glam, prog, or musical theater. But they knew this was something they had never heard before. Then came Queen 2, 1974, Sheer Heart Attack, 1974, and A Night at the Opera, 1975, where the name Freddie Mercury began to carve itself into the bedrock of music history. He wasn't just the frontman of Queen, he was Queen. Career success. In October 1975, inside Rockfield Studios in Wales, Freddie Mercury sat at the piano. Beside him lay a piece of paper scribbled with strange lines. "Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango?" No one in the band understood what he was doing. Even Freddie didn't bother explaining. He simply said, "It's like a little opera." but an opera for rock and roll. That song was Bohemian Rhapsody, nearly 6 minutes long, with no chorus, no traditional structure, blending ballad, opera, hard rock, and a cappella into a single composition. EMI fiercely objected. The BBC outright refused to play it. No one wants to hear a song that long. But Freddie stood firm, and then he proved the whole world wrong. Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't just a hit. It was an aesthetic revolution. It topped the UK charts for 9 weeks, sold over 1 million copies in Britain alone, and went down in history as one of the greatest songs of all time. Freddie didn't just sing. He became the song. His voice shifted with every section, agonized like a confession, theatrical like a courtroom drama, and finally, a madman's scream as he fell into the abyss. Audiences didn't fully understand it, but they felt like they had just heard someone's soul shatter. From that point on, Queen became a storm. Somebody to Love, We Are the Champions, Don't Stop Me Now, Killer Queen, Radio Gaga, I Want to Break Free. Each song was a new incarnation of Freddie, sometimes a lounge diva, sometimes an apocalyptic prophet, sometimes a desperate lover burning in desire. And then came Live Aid, July 13th, 1985, Wembley Stadium, 72,000 people in attendance, nearly 2 billion watching around the world. Queen had only 20 minutes, no special effects, no extravagant lighting, just the band, a microphone, and one man walking out with eyes ablaze. Freddie sang Radio Gaga, Hammer to Fall, We Are the Champions. And finally, that I-O rang out like a command. The whole world echoed it back. No one conducted, no one instructed. They responded on instinct. Because Freddie didn't need to lead. He was instinct. It was the performance that made Elton John exclaim, "All of us, Bowie, McCartney, everyone, we knew we'd just witnessed something greater than anything we'd ever done." But behind that dazzling spotlight, Freddie had already begun to fade. At Live Aid, he was carrying the HIV virus. And he knew. From then on, every song he wrote, Who Wants to Live Forever, The Show Must Go On, These Are the Days of Our Lives, tasted of farewell. But no one saw him cry. No one heard him complain. He simply sang, with everything he had left of life. Turmoil and shadows. Freddie Mercury lived like a comet, blazing, dazzling, and leaving no peace in his wake. But behind the roaring crowds and center stage spotlight was a man lost in his own life. By the late 1970s, as Queen reached their peak, Freddie began slipping deeper into a life of excess. All-night parties, countless one-night stands, hard liquor, cocaine, and sedatives blurred into one. Munich, where he lived and recorded much of his solo work, became a playground for the notorious, a place where every night was a carnival of flesh and narcotics, and Freddie was the reigning king of it all. Rumors swirled that he once hired dwarfs to serve cocaine on silver trays balanced on their heads, hosted parties with nude dancers, porn actors, drag queens, and even wild animals. The British tabloids called it a symphony of decadence. But to Freddie, it wasn't rebellion. It was a way to escape the fear within. Fear of abandonment, fear of being unloved, fear of not being allowed to be himself. He once said, "I live each day as if it's my last, because I know it could be." For all his reckless living, Freddie kept one thing deeply hidden: his sexuality. He was once engaged to Mary Austin, the woman he called the only true love of my life. But later, he confessed his attraction to men, and Mary, though heartbroken, remained part of his family. Freddie loved many men, from David Minns, Winfried Kirchberger, to Jim Hutton, but he never went public. In the 1980s society, where homosexuality was still labeled a contagious disease and a moral threat, Freddie chose silence. Not out of cowardice, but because he knew that a single admission could bury the band, the career, everything he had built. But that silence only fueled rumors that never stopped. The press hounded every sign of fatigue every time he declined a public appearance. Candid photos of his sunken cheeks, trembling hands, gaunt body became evidence of a truth everyone knew but no one dared confirm. Freddie Mercury was dying. Even within Queen, the truth was kept quiet. As Freddie lost the strength to sing, he recorded line by line, resting between takes, pushing himself to continue. In the song Mother Love, he only managed to record the first 3 sections. The rest was sung by Brian May. It was the only time Freddie couldn't complete a recording, and it was then the band finally understood. Time was up. But in all that darkness, Freddie never apologized. Not for being himself, not for loving too much, living too fast, or singing too painfully. And it was exactly that defiance within vulnerability that made him immortal. Personal life. Freddie Mercury was the kind of man who could get tens of thousands of people to chant his name. Yet throughout his life, he was truly close to only a handful of people. And a cat. Or 10. He could sing, "I was born to love you" to the entire world. But in real life, Freddie was always wrestling with a question that had no clear answer. What is love? And who is enough to love? In 1970, Freddie met Mary Austin at the Biba fashion store in London. Back then, he was just an unknown artist, and she was a shy 19-year-old girl with sad eyes. They quickly fell in love, lived together like husband and wife, and Freddie even proposed with a small ring. To him, Mary was home, the only place where he could be himself without needing to shine. But the stage lights and long tours pulled him away, along with feelings he had never dared to face. One day, Freddie confessed that he was attracted to men. Mary was stunned, but she didn't cry. She simply nodded and quietly moved to the apartment next door. Not to leave, but to remain close in case he ever needed her. They were no longer lovers, but what remained between them was even stronger than marriage. Freddie wrote "Love of My Life" for Mary, called her "my only legal wife," and in the end, left her everything: the Garden Lodge mansion, his fortune, and his music royalties. Not because he owed her, but because out of everyone, Mary was the one who never left. After Mary, Freddie entered a series of long-term same-sex relationships, openly within his circle of friends, but completely hidden from the press. From David Minns, Winfried Kirchberger, to Jim Hutton, who stayed by his side in his final years. He loved fiercely, but he was also fragile, jealous, and often pushed those he loved away. There was a time he gifted a lover a car just for saying something sweet, only to throw them out that same night over a poorly timed joke. For Freddie, love was always a battle. Between the instinct to burn with passion and the fear of being left again. Just like his parents had once left him alone at boarding school throughout his childhood. And among all his relationships, there was one kind of love that never betrayed him: his love for cats. Freddie had over 10 cats throughout his life. Each had a name, their own room, their own vet, and sometimes their own song. While on tour, he would call home just to hear the assistant update him on his kids. His solo album, Mr. Bad Guy, was dedicated to all my cats: Tom, Jerry, Oscar, Tiffany, Delilah, I love you. In his final days, Delilah was the only creature he wanted by his side. Not lovers, not friends, not colleagues. Freddie always laughed loudly, was the life of every party, the man who could walk into a room and draw every eye. But when the lights went out, he returned to his room, sat at the piano, put on glasses to read books about ancient Persian art, played with his cats, and quietly wondered, if I stop singing, will anyone still see me as a person? Close friends say he feared the dark, feared sleeping alone, feared silence even more than death itself. It wasn't the fear of a rock star. It was the fear of that 8-year-old boy, sent away to a boarding school, sitting in a cold dormitory with only the piano to listen. Freddie Mercury could ignite Wembley Stadium with a single note, but he never found someone gentle enough to lull him to sleep each night. And if his love life could be summed up in one sentence, perhaps it would be, "I could have everything, except peace." Final years. After Live Aid 1985, Freddie Mercury left the stage like a god. The world was still chanting his name, but inside he knew his body had begun to betray him. Just a few months after that fateful performance, Freddie received his diagnosis: HIV positive. It was the peak of fear and stigma, when AIDS was still called God's punishment, and a gay singer with the disease meant a career could be wiped out by a single headline. Freddie told no one. He released no statement. He didn't call the press to share the truth. He simply kept the secret to himself, just as he always did with the deepest wounds of his life. From that moment on, he lived two lives. One as the artist who kept recording, kept smiling, still dazzling in front of cameras. The other as a frail man, constantly coughing, so weak he could barely get out of bed. Every recording session had to be broken down line by line. He would stand, struggle to sing one phrase, then rest for half an hour before trying again. But that voice never cracked, never lost its fire, perhaps because he knew these might be his last songs. The track, "The Show Must Go On," was the pinnacle of that inner strength. When he heard the piece Brian May had written, Freddie was already too weak. No one believed he could possibly sing the chorus. But he just smiled, downed a glass of vodka, and stepped into the studio. His voice soared, not like a farewell, but like the howl of someone who knows he's dying yet refuses to surrender. No one in the room held back their tears. Throughout that period, Freddie almost never appeared in public. His body had deteriorated so much that even friends were only allowed to visit with strict selection. He kept his hair long to cover his face, wore long sleeves year-round to hide the wounds, and wore sunglasses indoors. As if he wanted the world to still see Freddie Mercury, but not the Farrokh Bulsara who was slowly fading. He spent his final months at the Garden Lodge mansion in Kensington with Jim Hutton, a few close friends, a nurse, and his cats. No more parties, no more laughter. Only soft piano music, the scent of lavender in the garden, and quiet conversations in the late afternoons. On November 23, 1991, knowing there wasn't much time left, Freddie finally spoke. He issued a brief statement. No tears, no justifications, no embellishments. "I confirm that I have tested positive for HIV and that I have AIDS. I felt it correct to keep this information private to date to protect the privacy of those around me. However, the time has come for my friends and fans around the world to know the truth. I hope everyone will join me, my doctors, and all those worldwide in the fight against this terrible disease." Just 24 hours later, on November 24, 1991, Freddie Mercury passed away in his sleep from AIDS-related pneumonia. No stage lights, no audience, no curtain call. Only those who truly loved him by his side. The funeral followed Zoroastrian rites, the religion he was raised in. His ashes were cremated, and later secretly buried by Mary Austin in an undisclosed location. No tombstone, no statue, no trace. He once said, "I don't want anyone poking around, romanticizing my death. When I'm gone, I want to rest." And he did rest, but the world did not. On the day Freddie Mercury died, it felt like all of Britain stopped breathing. The same tabloids that had hunted him now choked back grief to praise him. Those who had remained silent about the pain of the LGBT community now began to speak up, and millions, from devoted fans to people who had never listened to Queen, realized that something extraordinary had come to an end. A flame had gone out, but its shadow would never fade. Legacy and impact. Freddie Mercury left no final words, no farewell documentary, no teary goodbye concert, no last thank you to fans. He left only one sentence: "The show must go on." And then, like an artist who knows his role has been fulfilled, He quietly stepped off the stage of life, leaving the world with a void that nothing could ever fill. But from that void, the legend only grew larger. Just months after his death, those closest to him, Brian May, Roger Taylor, John Deacon, along with Elton John, David Bowie, and dozens of music legends, organized the Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley Stadium. Over 72,000 people attended, hundreds of millions watched on television, and tens of millions of dollars were raised for the Mercury Phoenix Trust, a global charity fighting HIV/AIDS in his name. Freddie became not only a rock icon, but a symbol of personal freedom, of the right to live truthfully and die truthfully. In an era when coming out could destroy a career, he chose not to speak, but also never to apologize. Later, artists like George Michael, Lady Gaga, Adam Lambert, and Elton John all admitted Freddie paved the way with the entirety of his life. His voice is still referenced as a biological phenomenon, nearly 4 octaves, a uniquely vibrating larynx, the ability to switch between baritone and tenor in a single breath. But what people remember most isn't the technique, it's the emotion. It's the way he turned a simple lyric like, "Is this the real life?" into the collective sigh of all humanity. Bohemian Rhapsody was voted the greatest song in British history. Live Aid 1985 is considered the greatest rock performance of all time. Queen was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, 2001, the Songwriters Hall of Fame, 2003, and received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The film Bohemian Rhapsody, 2018, which portrayed his life without avoiding its darkness, won 4 Oscars, introducing millions of young viewers to the truth. Freddie was unlike anyone who ever existed. But perhaps the greatest legacy he left behind isn't found in museums, trophies, or platinum records. It's in that stillness we feel while listening to Who Wants to Live Forever. In the moment, an entire crowd raises their hands to Radio Gaga. In those who once felt different, abandoned, who suddenly found comfort in a man the world never fully understood. Freddie Mercury didn't try to live forever. He didn't crave immortality. He just wanted to live truthfully, in every note, every glance, every fleeting second life gave him. And that's why he didn't need to live forever, because the world will never forget him. Freddie Mercury never tried to become a legend. He didn't craft an image, didn't beg for sympathy, didn't play the role of a glorious victim for anyone. He was simply himself, someone thrown out of the center, who didn't belong anywhere, yet made the whole world revolve around his voice. He wasn't a perfect star. He was bold, mysterious, at times ruthless, lost, full of contradictions. But it was that very imperfection that made him real, and made millions see themselves in his torn, aching songs. Freddie could make you cry with Love of My Life, then burst out laughing at the absurdity he unleashed on stage. He lived at the extremes and turned them into art. In an entertainment world increasingly programmed by algorithms where everything must fit market expectations, Freddie Mercury was an off-key melody. And that's exactly why no one could ever replicate him. He once sang, "I won't be a rock star, I will be a legend." And he was right. Completely, desperately, and beautifully right. If you were ever that different kid, if you ever felt too afraid to love, too afraid to sing, too afraid to live honestly, if you were ever pushed out of the spotlight, then Freddie's story isn't just something to remember, it's a reminder. You can still reach the world, even if the world once rejected you. Thank you for watching until the very end. If Freddie Mercury ever changed something in you, leave a comment, a memory, or your favorite song. And if you believe this story should be shared, spread it so that flame never goes out.